Hey you guys, it's your girl Antoinette, and today we coming at you with the video, and it's called NYC Evicts Tourists and Give Hotels to Migrants. Why would they want to do that? I thought that's what they wanted, was the tourists to come in to help pay for like things, you know, because you know they have like a tourist tax, and so why would they want to kick the tourist people out? And they're going to make people not even want to come to New York because it's already being flooded with immigrants and stuff. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn your notifications on so you can see me. And let's get into this wild video because this is crazy.
The New York Times reports that roughly 135 out of the 680 hotels scattered across the city's 5 boroughs entered the immigration program that allows migrants to be housed in hotels. Now that means fewer beds are available for tourists. Average hotel costs right now.
New York has received so many asylum seekers that its shelter system is now full, which is why the city is now quietly turning hotels into shelters. Which means the tourists who were staying there now have nowhere to go. But critics say this isn't just going to cost the city valuable tourism dollars it desperately needs right now. It's also going to cost some New Yorkers everything they have.
An exclusive behind-the-scenes look at the potentially dangerous conditions at a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan, a hotel that's been turned into a public shelter for migrants.
Dozens of people showed up to protest. Several of the demonstrators taken away into police custody.
Accumulating garbage is only a small part of what workers there are dealing with. Workers are constantly seizing hot plates, pots, and pans from the rooms.
If those hot plates got you on fire, this whole hotel will go down in flames.
The
average hotel price for every traveler has jumped 8.5% in a year.
It's every day you'll find someone cooking. They burn the carpets with the hot plates.
What's the solution?
Well, they'd have to change the law in New York City to eliminate the right to shelter, at least the right to shelter for non-citizens of New York City, let's say. That's what's holding migrants in New York City, is that they have a right to shelter.
What do y'all think about that? Well, how would y'all? I know I would be so freaking pissed if I didn't flew from my home state to New York to get there and I don't even have a place to stay. I'd be ready to fight. I would be ready to fight. I'd be ready to throw hands. Anybody can get this work. And then they bring in hot plates and stuff like that. No sooner they bring the hot plates in, I was like, no, go. No, it's in your room. It's in y'all belonging. I don't care how many people in here. Everybody gotta leave. Because if just like they said, if it was to catch on fire, the whole hotel gonna go down. Everyone is gonna, you know, some people are gonna lose their life because people being stupid. You can't do that.
Since the year began, New York has been quietly hunting down as many hotels it can turn into shelters as possible. But even though critics say this might cost the city tourism money and cost some people their jobs, what nobody's talking about is that most people have no idea this is even going on. Because for some reason, our leaders aren't bragging about this multi-million-dollar expansion of the asylum industrial complex. Probably because critics say the idea of turning historic Manhattan hotels that were meant for tourists and travelers into shelters is incredibly controversial. Not to mention it's so expensive, it's unsustainable. And it's secretly come out that these hotels are making way more money off the backs of asylum seekers and taxpayers than they ever were off tourists. But city leaders say their hands are tied and that they're being forced to rent out as many hotels as they can because almost 200,000 asylum seekers have come here since this crisis started. The city's existing shelters are at capacity, and the problem is that every time the city tries to open a shelter in any neighborhood, they always get pushed back. There are always protests. Residents are always unhappy with that placement, stating that the shelters are inhumane and unacceptable and blaming the asylum crisis for overwhelming their neighborhoods and changing them in ways residents did not expect. But what's ridiculous about this is 80% of New Yorkers still favor the city's right to shelter rules that give people a place to stay when they've got nowhere else to go, just as long as it doesn't happen across the street from their multi-million-dollar condo, making it almost impossible for our city's leaders to obey the law and take care of the folks that it is mandated to house. Which brings us to the real reason the city's buying up every hotel it can get its hands on, because activists and protesters have pinned the mayor in a corner. There's simply nowhere else where he can house people that won't generate instant lawsuits and instant instant pushback, as many of these hotels are located in decidedly commercial and non-residential parts of the city, which makes them not only the perfect place to house the needy without getting pushback from people who say they care about the needy, oh no, they're also the perfect place to house people so the owners of these hotels can get even richer.
I see.
This is the former Holiday Inn on Washington Street in the Financial Center, which is now a shelter for asylum seekers. And not only is this hotel just 9 years old, it's the tallest Holiday Inn in the entire world at 450 feet, 50 stories, 493 rooms. Plus, the hotel entrance is right around the corner from One World Trade. And although many aspects of using a hotel like this might seem and look controversial, the city says they've got no choice, even if it puts the local economy at risk.
The New York Times reports that roughly 135 out of the 680 hotels scattered across the city's 5 boroughs entered the immigration program that allows migrants to be housed in hotels. The average hotel price for every traveler has jumped 8.5% in a year. Average hotel.
135 out of 680. That's 20% of the city's hotel capacity. Now, it's important to understand that these hotels are not all exclusively used as shelters. This one is, but others are used as shelter of last resort, which is a technical term the city uses for rooms that might contract on an overflow basis. Those hotels are willing to accept a family and house them for 28 days before the city can find them another place to stay on a more permanent basis, which has been a very helpful program to the city. Last year in September, there was a point where 14 buses arrived in the city within a 24-hour period delivering people from the southern border. They didn't have anywhere to put people, and hotels came into play to keep people off the streets and keep children from having to sleep over here. That would be awful. And when you think about it, the unpredictable nature of the city's asylum crisis necessitates an emergency housing plan that's gonna involve hotels in some manner. Because after all, the humanitarian crisis we're experiencing here in New York, it exists because of a larger crisis elsewhere south of here.
I don't know how this changes anytime soon.
They'd have to change the law in New York City to eliminate the right to shelter, at least the right to shelter for non-citizens of New York City, let's say. That's what's holding migrants in New York City, is that they have...
Certainly, this is something that we've heard before, that the city's right to shelter policies are a magnet for migration. However, staying in a former Holiday Inn for a month and then getting evicted isn't really a vacation, and it's important to remember that this is the law. Anybody, no matter who the mayor is, they have to obey, and they have to house people who have nowhere else to go. And you know, even a certain former 45th president, even if he were the mayor, he would still have to obey the law. And he wouldn't be able to just write down what he thinks the law should be and enforce that. It's not how it works. And before we get into how rising hotel prices could end up costing the city more than anybody realizes in the long run, understand that hotels like this are being chosen for a specific purpose. Not only were these places bankrupt, not making any money whatsoever, look at where we are. We're in a commercial district surrounded by offices. This isn't a neighborhood. There are other hotels and other government buildings down here. The point is that the number of people who are going to be upset by the presence of a shelter down here is much, much smaller than it is in, say, a residential neighborhood. The police are not going to protest the presence of a shelter. And the ultra-rich in this condo across the street, they may have not even moved into the property yet. And the way that tourists protest, well, they make different vacation plans. That's what they do. They stay in another part of town. They pay more money to live somewhere else for their trip. Or sadly, their trip doesn't happen. It's also worth mentioning that even though activists have figured out how to protest every shelter the city's ever tried to make, it's gonna be pretty hard to protest a 9-year-old hotel as being inhumane. But that's not even the most controversial part of this, because the owners of hotels like this, last year they lobbied for the passage of a law that was guaranteed to help them profit off the asylum crisis in ways nobody had anticipated.
New York City Council has managed to legislate that Airbnbs can't fully do business, so we could really use them right now, but they won't legislate that non-citizens have to be housed somewhere else.
Another shining example of economics 101, something foreign to Democrats.
So even though on the television this immediately all went political, we've got to agree on basic economics. If you all of a sudden have less of something and the demand for that thing remains where it's at, price has to go up. And that's what's happening with the hotels, because all of those apartments that competed with places like this for a hotel room, now that single occupancy Airbnbs are gone, prices on single occupancy hotel rooms are up. Look at this, you're now paying over $400 a night for the Courtyard Marriott. And what's fascinating about this is it's made the city's job of using hotels as shelters even tougher, because supply of hotel rooms is now lower. And before the Holiday Inn became a shelter, the owners were getting 73% less money per room, and the hotel was running into financial trouble. Previously, they were getting about $100 a night. Now they're getting around $190 a night. And what you have here is the real estate industry just totally playing the city without the city having any idea this was ever going to happen. But are our leaders being financially irresponsible, overpaying for these hotel rooms, or is there another reason prices are so high? In the city's defense, if it wants to rent out a hotel as a shelter and the hotel is already bankrupt and closed, there's no way the hotel could reopen at the same prices it was getting because those prices weren't enough for them to stay open.
Right.
And that means their rates have to go up in order for them to do what the city wants. And even though every single analysis on this makes it look like the city is losing, they might actually be winning because there's a chance that for these hotels to operate successfully, they would actually need to charge more than what they charge the city because the city's guaranteeing them 100% occupancy for several years in a row. And this is also the case with many of the city's other hotels, like the Roosevelt Hotel, which has 1,000 rooms and is now the intake and processing center for new asylum seekers when they arrive in the city. You've also got the Row Hotel, which also has around 1,000 rooms down the street from the bus terminal where many people arrive. Both of these were also bankrupt as a result of 2020. So yes, the city's available hotel space has gone down, but a lot of the hotels they're making deals with were already bankrupt and weren't on the market for tourists to begin with. Unless you assume that if the government hadn't stepped in, the free market would have been forced to find a way to open these bankrupt buildings back up and start making money because at the end of the day, they're an asset, and if somebody who's smart enough knows how to run it, they should. But when the city comes along begging for shelter space because they've got no other available options, the owners of these hotels, I mean, they're not stupid. They're gonna take the money.
It is worth noting that many of those 100+ hotels got into this program because they were on the verge of default and bankruptcy. But one thing I would point out is that New York writ large has a housing crisis. It's not just about the hotel rooms. The former Congresswoman is nodding vigorously here because it's true. There are all bad government policies. Well, there are a whole lot of people.
You know that saying, never let a crisis go to waste? Well, that's what
I'm saying. I'm like, they could have. I think by them getting like the hotels, like the ones that's on verge of bankrupt, I think that's pretty okay to house these people. But them people gonna mess their own self up in the long run. They're gonna mess their own self up, and it is starting to be a crisis. It's getting ridiculous.
What we're witnessing here, the city's got several crises. You've got a housing crisis coupled with a humanitarian crisis. They both fuel each other. And with the city's archaic laws set to make both of these crises continue far into the future, anyone who owns housing stands to make a lot of money if they play their cards right. It's also worth mentioning that these hotels were trying to play their cards towards the tourist industry, but since that is less profitable than being part of the asylum industrial complex, they've changed how they're playing. But you know, it almost seems like all of this couldn't have come at a better time for the hotel lobbying industry, because after 2020, these guys were in a tough spot. They had lost a lot of money. Their businesses weren't thriving anymore, and now they're thriving more than they ever have because of a bunch of laws that are now operating in their favor. But even though many of these hotel owners are happy as clams right now, there's fear that this reallocation of resources could cost the city a lot of money in the long run, because tourism brings the city $70 billion a year of economic activity, over $6 billion in revenue. And one of the things that will always be controversial about the asylum crisis is that it costs the city money, whereas industries like tourism make people money and employ people. But again, this is not an issue of good economic policy. This is an issue of what is the law and how do we obey it without constant protests and pushback from voters. But now that tourists are few and far between because coming here is just more expensive than it's ever been, the livelihoods of those involved in this $70 billion a year industry are all at stake, which has some people saying that the longer the asylum crisis continues, the further we head towards another crisis. Because if people lose their jobs, lose their businesses, and lose their livelihoods, they're gonna need help too, just like the asylum seekers. And then what's the city gonna do?
Can't do nothing. But it just accept it. Try to get people to come, and they ain't gonna want to now.
Everything you see here is what it looks like when an industry that used to support an area of town is now gone, or at least not what it used to be. When I used to work down here, this area was packed, it was vibrant, things were much different than this. This is like a ghost town almost. And that's because the foot traffic here isn't what it used to be. And even though some are blaming the decline of this neighborhood on the presence of the shelters themselves, that might not be entirely accurate, as you used to have a lot of office traffic down here. We used to go out to lunch as accountants. That was the thing that you did, but I had to be in the office every single day. People don't have to do that anymore, yet all the same, if you replace the tourist traffic that was coming from hotels with a different type of foot traffic that's not maybe able to spend money the same way a tourist on vacation would, things could also change. And let's face it, the rents for these little businesses and stores around here, the landlords came up with those numbers that they're charging all of these people based on how things used to be, not based on potentially dire predictions of future economic performance. Yeah. And that makes it hard to tell why there are so many boarded up storefronts down here. And to many people, this neighborhood looks how it was going to look as a result of what happened a couple of years ago when everything changed in 2020. And these store closures are not the fault of the asylum crisis, at least directly. For example, the Courtyard Marriott down the street from all these vacant storefronts, it's got vacancy right now. Yes, the prices are very high, but even if that Holiday Inn was still open, that's only 493 rooms, 493 families. Is that gonna keep an entire local neighborhood the way that it used to be? I don't know. Yet at the exact same time, some people are saying that the decreased supply of hotels is having absolutely no effect on the tourism industry whatsoever.
Those aren't leading brands, if you will. I'm going to be in New York this weekend, and I found a hotel room that was reasonably priced, if you will. So
that's not fair to working
people. The reality is, well, I'm working people. I have a job. I mean, my goodness gracious.
You've got a highly remunerative job.
$300 a pop right now.
So a celebrity on TV with a nice suit and a gold watch and a gold bracelet says that he doesn't have any problem finding an affordable hotel room. I somehow believe him. And that explains a lot why the asylum crisis looks the way that it does, because it's only natural to think that if something's not a problem for you, it's not a problem for anybody else. For example, if you don't live near a shelter or run a business by one, you won't know that that place even exists. For example, one of the most controversial shelters is a massive facility in Brooklyn that houses almost 4,000 people in a...
Really? He just gonna sit there and say that? He be like, I didn't have a problem finding a hotel. Duh, you're not, because you have that type of money. You know, like when regular people, actual regular people like you and me, yes, we're not gonna pay no $400 or something a night. We're not gonna pay $300 or something a night. And we're gonna be looking at it. We not gonna be too much paying a $200. We might be, if we do, we're gonna be expecting the best. At least I am, because I'm cheap. 100 or something, like 100 or something, I can kind of like, I pay it, but we gonna stay to exact checkout time. But like, no, like that woman had every right to get on him. She was like, well, your work, your type of job ain't like everyone else's job. It's more a little bit extra you can get.
2-block radius. Local residents in that neighborhood are protesting the presence of the shelter, saying it's overwhelming their neighborhoods, but at the same time, the folks that are in the shelter have nowhere else to go. They can't work for a living. They're basically there all day. And is it right for New Yorkers to say they support the city's right to shelter by an 80% landslide margin and then to have a problem with people going to a public park? But the point is, just around the corner from where that shelter's located, the neighborhood itself looks completely the way that it always has. It's one of the nicest neighborhoods in all of New York, so it's hard to say how much the asylum crisis is affecting places that claim it's affecting them. Plus, it's worth mentioning that a rich celebrity who gets paid to travel around and go places may have a different outlook on hotel prices than people who save for their one family vacation a year and then end up having to make different choices in the future once they realize things are more expensive than they had planned. Either way, the mayor is between a rock and a hard place here. He understands the need to have jobs and a thriving economy, yet at the same time, he has to obey the law. So what's he supposed to do other than rent out hotels and give city money to these landlords who are already making millions?
There could be a lot of economic factors that drive the prices up, including corporations who own hotels.
Well, no.
That's a real fact.
It's supply and demand, though, right? Like, it's supply and demand doesn't. It's not specific to this. I mean, that's just if you squeeze supply of something and the demand is the same, prices go up.
You know, it looks like the city's ban on Airbnbs would have done wonders as a bailout for the hotel industry, even without the asylum crisis. After all, budget apartments were competing with lower-end hotels, and with that competition now gone, any and all tourist money would have to get funneled right through the hotels. And that probably would have been enough to help a lot of these places recover back to where they used to be. And what that means is New York City's already in the business of passing anti-competitive, anti-tourism laws, which function as handouts to large sectors of its economy. And now that people are upset the hotels are profiting even further from the asylum crisis, it really does look like a perfect storm of legislation that was only going to go one way once all of of the pieces fell into place. Is that what's happening here? Has the New York City hotel industry rigged the game against the taxpayers to make money off of them and the asylum seekers? Do they care about tourists? Do they care about supporting the local economy? Or do they only care about themselves? Does any business care about anybody else other than itself? Let me know what you think. How would you fix the housing crisis here in New York and take care of the asylum seekers that are here? I will see you in the next video.
So comfortable.
Well, good luck, because they don't care. They don't care about no one but themselves, and that's it. They're gonna just try to patch it up as best as they can to make it look like they care, and they don't. They don't. They're gonna try to patch the crisis up and make it all shiny and spray it with perfume and say, here you go. I think we did a good job. I think this is gonna help all of us. It's gonna help everyone. So what do y'all think? How do y'all think they can help? Cause I'm still like puzzled, because it's so many people. I mean, the easiest thing to do is to send them back. You know, that's just my thing. Like, that could be like, I don't know, like, like, my thing is, I'm trying to wrap my head around the bigger picture about this. I'm like, why are y'all even coming over here? For one thing, you know, it's so many questions that needs answers for me to even start to try to understand this, because I get it, but I'm just saying, like, go back. Because I know one thing, America is giving them like better things that they actually giving the people that's actually here. They're helping them more. So I see that's one of the reasons why they coming over here, and maybe the only reason why. But it is crazy. It's really crazy, and I don't think I would want to try to come over here to just still be mistreated in so many other ways. Might as well stay where you at if you're going to get mistreated. But you guys, you tell me what y'all thought about the video, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Bye, you guys.